Bust out the scotch, boys! We got a live one! Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting episode of Atheist Church Audit. My name is Jared. I'm an atheist. I'm desperately in need of a haircut, and today I went to Antiochian Orthodox Church. All right, wow. Today was a day. I have felt a lot of emotions today, and I'm excited to share them with you all here. To my Ortho Bro audience, come here. Come here. Fist bump. Come, give me a fist bump. Guys, this service was absolutely exceptional. This whole day was absolutely exceptional. Home run, knock 'em dead, home run out of the park, absolutely phenomenal. And I want to talk about what made it so exceptional today and why I'm going to be speaking about this in such glowing terms. Now, I'll say this from the get-go, that my hope for this is not to just, stroke the ego of my Orthodox audience and to convince you all to go visit an Orthodox church, even though I think you should, but it's also to help Christians across denominational lines see what makes for a really impactful and positive church experience from somebody who doesn't have a dog in this fight. So today, I went to All Saints Antiochian? It's of Antioch, but I think it's Antiochian Orthodox Church. Today is Sunday, December 22nd, so the Sunday before Christmas, and I was told that their Christmas service is not like as big of a hoopla as their Pascha service. Pascha with a K sound. I read your comments. But so, yeah, I wanted to go and visit just a general Christmas service at the Orthodox Church near me, and this was exceptional. It was really great. So I hope you'll forgive me for mislabeling all of the technical jargon in the Orthodox Church. If you're new here, I hopscotch around a lot of different churches, and they all have different words for the same kind of thing. Oh, it's not a church, it's a meeting house / ward / kingdom hall / temple / I don't care. I literally do not care. So I showed up at 9 a.m. for their Orthros prayer service. Now, this church is not huge. It seats maybe 300-ish people, but as far as beautiful buildings and beautiful spaces go, inside and out, this place was immaculate. Now, I've talked about this with some historic churches, right? Where, like, oh, this is the oldest church in America, or oh, this was, I don't know, like built by some great king or bishop or something. This was just a normal church, but it's clear that somebody poured their heart and soul into this thing to make it a holy place, and it feels that way. And, I'm not gonna lie, I would bet money that this is not exponentially more expensive than your average run-of-the-mill box church. Every time I walk into an ugly church, the excuse that's always given is like, well, we're thinking of the poor and we are just trying to do this on a budget. I wanna see some hard numbers here. If you're a church architect, I wanna know, like, how much more expensive is it actually to build a church like this than it is to build a box church, like a renovated CVS? Because on paper, I agree that you shouldn't be, just throwing money at gold statues and diamond necklaces for your icons, but I don't think that this place was like 5 times the price of an average church. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but it seems like there was just a level of intentionality to make this place feel like a place that is built for reverence. And I felt that as a non-believer. So I walk in through the front door, and there is a greeter here this time. And the greeter, Cheryl, hi Cheryl, was talking a young gentleman through what to do throughout the service. It was only his second time here, and so she was giving him the, how-to of an average Orthodox service. And so after she was done speaking with him, I walked up to her and I was like, hey, I'm a noob too. And she chuckled, and then she talked me through what to do through the service, which, I'm not gonna lie, is really sincerely appreciated, because I'm a noob and I don't know what to do, and I'm probably gonna make a fool of myself. And just having somebody there to say like, hey, there's really no pressure, just when in doubt, follow the crowd, do whatever you're comfortable with, and that kind of thing is actually really appreciated. Now, Cheryl was by far the warmest greeter I have ever received in any church, ever, period. And she walked this perfectly narrow line of being exceptionally welcoming, but not being like overbearing and like, let's get you to sign up and I don't know like how to express this, but it was like she was glad that I was there, not because she was like, we got another soul saved, or like, finally we, convinced you that we were right. Just the expression on her face, it seemed like this was something that meant a lot to her, and she was excited to share it. And that was the end of it. It didn't feel like she was paid to be there. It didn't feel like she was going to lose her job if she didn't show me a big smile. It was just the liturgy and all of it. It seemed like it meant a lot to her, and she was excited to share it with me. Mwah. Beautiful. Chef's kiss. In addition to that, there's two very important things that she did that I really want to harp on. Firstly, as we were talking, the priest came through with his holy entourage, and he was, I don't know the term for it, incensing the room with his jingle bells incense. And as he came into the foyer, she paused, stopped speaking with me, turned to him, and bowed. And something about that feels profound. That even though I was a visitor, and even though she, wanted to make me feel welcomed, that came second to paying homage to God. And this is something that I will criticize Protestants endlessly for. And that is that so much of Protestant evangelism is face-to-face. It's done by, trying to persuade you rather than being done by example. And it's even set up in the services where the divine liturgy happens and the priest is often facing away from the congregation. And it gives you this sense of like, you mean I'm not the star of the show? Like, no, like God's here. That's why we're here, because of God. And it feels more compelling. It makes me kind of like, what's happening over there? They're worshiping something? There's kind of like an innate human tendency to follow the eyeballs and to follow where the eyeballs are looking. What Cheryl did there was a clear demonstration that the audience is secondary. God is first. First and foremost, this is a place to revere God. And I've got to be honest that it makes the entire experience feel a lot more profound, that I'm not being like pitched to. Like, yeah, like they're happy I'm here. They're happy that I'm, coming to experience this great thing. But the entire gathering isn't to convince me of a theological proposition. It's to worship God. Mwah, beautiful, outstanding, really good. Also, I don't think that the Orthodox are teetotalers, so I hope y'all don't mind me enjoying an old fashioned this evening. Speaking of which, tonight's sponsor, Maker's Mark. I'm kidding. That's not real. That's not a thing, unfortunately. God, that would be so fucking sick. I would make so much fucking money. Oh my fuck. The second very important thing that Cheryl did while speaking to me is she said, and if at any point you have questions, you want to set up a meeting with the priest. I'm sorry. Set up a meeting with the priest? You don't know me. I haven't proven that I'm going to be a tithing member to this church yet. But to my astonishment, it was just like, well, yeah, you're welcome to meet with him. We would love to introduce you to him. Do you know how many pastors I've tried to talk to and it was just impossible? I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of a scary thing how disconnected some pastors are from their congregations, and it's kind of starting to piss me off. Now, listen, I get it that not every pastor is going to have the time to be a personal counselor to 300 plus people, but I'm not necessarily talking about, being a full-on counselor. I'm just talking about being a friend. I'm just talking about being that you can sit down with and ask theological questions to. Oh, gosh, man, dude. So I get coffee with a lot of pastors from all denominations. And I spoke to one pastor recently and I wanted to scream. He basically told me in no uncertain terms that he really just does the preaching. Kind of like the preaching and the strategy for the church. Outside of that, kind of icky. I was like, wait, you don't do marriage counseling or theological training? And his response was kind of like, well, if somebody really needs counseling, we want them to be able to see a professional. And so we just, send them down the street and we foot the bill. I'm not gonna lie, man, that feels gross. It feels dystopian. I'm trying to steelman this. Granted, some people are going to, need genuine psychological help. And for those instances, for the church to have enough humility to say, hey, this is, outside of our pay grade, we think that you should go and seek a specialized therapist, psychiatrist, etc. Perfectly valid. I totally understand. But when that is the default, what the hell is the point of your church community? Oh my God, it was It was scary, man. So the fact that I just walked in here and the first thing out of this woman's mouth was like, yeah, if you want to talk to the priest, like you're more than welcome to. And that priest, who I will mention in a little while, absolutely put his money where his mouth was. 10 out of 10. So I said thank you to Cheryl, and I walk inside and take my seat. Cheryl, if you're watching this, you are a wonderful human being, and I hope you're thriving. If you've never been to an Orthodox church, let me set the stage for you. Ultimately, it's not that different from any other church, insofar as it's a big, wide open building. And gosh, I think that like Protestants assume that they sprinkle the walls with pixie dust or something to make it feel categorically different. It's still just a building made of drywall and wood and stuff. The difference is that they have tried their darndest to make it feel like a sacred space. At the front of the church is the iconostasis, this huge wall of icons in the quintessential Orthodox fashion. You have Christ on the right, the Theotokos on the left, and then in addition to that, you have, the martyrs and the saints in the stained glass. You have icons just everywhere. And the whole thing is set up to give you a sense that, hey, you're not in this faith journey alone. You have a great cloud of witnesses who have come before you, which I've got to be honest, is refreshing when you compare it to the solipsism that you find in a lot of Protestant circles. Because for a lot of Protestants, I'm looking at you Baptists, it's about you and Jesus, and there's nobody else. Nothing else matters. It's just you and that guy. And have you said this prayer yet? Because if you hadn't said this prayer yet, then you're going to hell. Whereas this feels like an homage to all of the saints who have come before you, who have wrestled with similar things that you have, who have prayed the same prayers that you have, and it's to make you feel like you're not alone in this struggle. So, very cool. So that's with all Orthodox churches though, but I want to emphasize this in particular parish. At this congregation, this is probably by far the most children I've ever seen anywhere. Even compared to the Mormon church, there was just like a sea of 4-year-olds running around, and it was really cute. It was really endearing. With Orthodoxy, almost always, there's been a couple of exceptions, but I'm not going to mention those. You don't have any instruments. It is entirely a cappella. And I will say that I can imagine at much smaller Orthodox congregations, it not sounding very good, but this was some of the prettiest church music I've ever heard. The cantors here were well-versed and well-practiced, and it absolutely showed, and it was just beautiful. Now, I talked about this in a recent video. I'm trying to hopscotch around to see as many, Christmas variations of church services as possible, to see how they do Christmas across denominational lines. And I think one of my biggest takeaways for Christmas services across denominational lines is that it doesn't feel real. Like it very rarely strikes the right tone in my mind. Can I give like a parody example of how I imagine like Protestants talking about the virgin birth? Here, let me get in character. So I pulled up to Starbucks the other day and I ordered a caramel macchiato, right? You guys know that I like a caramel macchiato. I pull up to the window and the girl gives me a peppermint mocha. A little bit of a surprise, right? That's the unforgivable sin in my book. I'm just joking. But seriously, I was surprised. You know who else was surprised? The Virgin Mary. And it's one of those things where I just can't take it seriously. The idea that God appears to a 13-year-old girl because God has perfectly ordained for you to be the vessel that carries God into the earth. No one's going to believe you, and everyone's going to think that you just slept around. It just doesn't quite strike that same tone. It's a crazy story, and I think that it has been so infantilized by, seeker-friendly churches that it's difficult for us to read it and say like, oh my gosh, that's really wild and heavy. And I don't know that I can explain this well, but here in an ancient church, it feels like how this story was meant to be told. Again, I talked about this in my last video, that it felt like there's almost a spectrum of how people talk about miracles and the Bible. On the one hand is to make it like personable, like, the trials and tribulations that Mary went through, they're basically the same as you being stressed about your taxes. Oh gosh. And then on the other hand, you have some like hyper rationalistic empiricist apologists who try to suck the magic out of this whole thing, where they take a story or they take a miracle claim and they try to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it absolutely happened, and you can be super duper confident that it actually happened. And if you're in that camp, I don't want you to feel like you shouldn't be doing, biblical archaeology or apologetics or whatever, but it starts to feel like the hunt for Bigfoot, if I'm being totally painstakingly honest. And my point isn't to, not do those things, but it shouldn't be the point of the sermon. Like if you're talking about Jesus turning water into wine, the sermon should not be about, well, when Jesus turned water into wine, it was the hydrogen molecules in the water that actually shifted their molecular function into turning into grape juice, which then was fermented by, because that's not the point of the story. And I feel like here today, it sounded and felt like the point of the story. And not only that it was like accurately conveying the depth of the message and the profundity of the message, but it sounded and felt like the way that the story was meant to be conveyed. It just gives you that sense that this is an ancient story that's being told by ancient people. Like if you close your eyes and listen to the chants, it somehow felt like you were, in a cave in first century Palestine. Did you hear about the virgin who gave birth to the Messiah? This breathless awe that's there throughout the service. It feels deep. It feels profound. So, very good. Oh God, I'm inebriated. So the service was beautiful. And after the service, they had, coffee time. Also served at coffee time, I really don't know what to call this. They had hummus.
We both agree that hummus is very healthy.
So we're making progress.
And you can hook, line, and sinker your boy with some hummus. Sorry, I just really want to stress this. Very big hummus fan. But so as I was chilling in there, sipping my coffee, eating my hummus, the priest's wife walks up to me. And in spite of keeping track with 4 different kids, she gave me a super warm greeting. And she asked me if I was Orthodox. And I just straight up told her oh no, I'm actually an atheist, which I hardly ever do. Usually I soften it somehow and say that I'm a seeker, but it seemed kind of no, she's an adult, she can take it. And she took it in stride. And then, before I know it, she told her husband, Father David, to come and say hi to me. And he did. And we got into a really good conversation. Then after that, there was an hour-long intro to orthodoxy class that he was teaching. And so I sat in for that, kind of like the Orthodox equivalent of Sunday school, I guess. And I want to stress how good this was. He was talking about St. Anthony of the Desert and his wrestlings with the devil. And his takeaways were just very modest. It wasn't like you need to go crawl in the Via Dolorosa on your hands and knees for 3 days, but his takeaways were much more modest and moderate and maybe, you need to take care of yourself and you need to quiet your heart and try to walk in humility. Wonderful. Wonderful. So after he was finished with the intro to Orthodoxy, there were 5 or 10 people just standing around waiting to talk to him, asking about marriage advice and how to better witness to their friends and family. And he was just there for all of it. And I'm pretty sure the poor guy was fasting too, so I'm sure he was eager to get home and eat. But he stayed with all of them. And it's frustrating to me, having seen so many pastors where as soon as the service is over, they're gone. And I get it, man. There's going to be annoying people who run up to you afterwards and they're, yanking your chain, asking you, about really stupid theological questions. But the patience that this pastor had was a better evangelistic method than any of the street preaching that I've ever seen. Just actually showing somebody that you're there for them. Why is this so hard? It's crazy. It's like you're a pastor of a community. And I want to offer some potential insight to why I think this is the case and why I think orthodoxy actually sets itself up nicely to interact in this way. With Protestants, the sermon is the main thing. Maybe with Pentecostals, it's the worship. But in the vast majority of cases, the sermon is the meat and potatoes of it. You bring your Bible and you turn to that passage and all hail the mighty wisdom of the sermon. And in those circles, it's the pastor's job to bring the word. And man, he can't just read the text. No, he's got to give some incredibly profound point that you've never heard before. He's got to change your whole paradigm and how to think about the story. And it's got to be exhausting. It's got to be really taxing. And I'm sure that giving a sermon like that, it's a lot of pressure, to feel like you have to change the worldview of these people every Sunday. In Orthodox circles and in Catholic circles, to be fair, the purpose is not the sermon. The purpose is the Eucharist. The purpose is the liturgy. And these priests will spend time preparing for the homily, but they're not like exhausted by the end of the week, having to read all of Strong's Concordance to prepare for their message on Psalm 24. And I have to wonder if that frees up their cognitive bandwidth to be able to just be better pastors to their parishioners. So I was already really impressed by Father David. And I was, sitting there in the back, waiting to have, the last word with him, just say thank you for a wonderful service. He walks over to me and says, "You want to grab coffee?" And without a hitch, invited me over to his house. I've been doing this for over a year. Why is this the first time that anyone has offered something like this to me? This man's in his late 30s and he's got 4 kids. He's got 4 kids and a wife. He doesn't know me and he doesn't owe me anything. And he invited me into his home. And what's even better is there was no effort to try to convert me. He asked about why I was an atheist. He asked about why I didn't believe, but there was never any attempt to try to I'm gonna argue you back in the faith. He brought me over to his house. His daughter played the violin for us. His wife made me a latte and it was really freaking good. And we just talked. We talked about my seminary experience and how he graduated from Biola and the incredible concept of apophatic meditation. And all of it felt good. It felt really good. And I don't know why this is so hard for pastors. I don't know why this is so hard to replicate. Have a service that's about Jesus. Have a service that's not about you. And then be a pastor to these people and love people. Be a physician to the dying. Pray with the people who are scared. Why is this so complicated? Crazy, man. Crazy. Now listen, I don't want to feel like a shill for Constantinople. I try to stay unbiased in this stuff, but dude, you're just giving me too many W's to work with. There's a lot of things that are really good here. There's a lot of things that are really worth celebrating. In a weird way, it's like Orthodoxy is more hellfire and brimstone than Baptists, because all throughout the service, it's just Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. So it feels like the liturgy brings you to a place of humility and a posture of begging for God's mercy, but it doesn't feel like it has the same emotional and psychological damage of just berating your conscience as, a dirty, filthy, no good sinner in the way that some reform circles do. And my hunch is that it's probably better for long-term, abstaining from sin. Oh gosh, and I need to harp on Father David a little bit more because he's a G, man. He just wasn't fazed by my atheism. He didn't feel the need to correct it or psychoanalyze it or think I've got the one thing that's gonna convince you, because I promise you don't. But when we were talking about the New Testament and we were talking about Jesus, he brought up the Pharisees and he was like, yeah, man, when Jesus was criticizing the scribes and the Pharisees and the legalists, I really have to wonder, is that me? And it didn't seem like some sort of feigned sense of humility, but he took that seriously as yeah, man, that's a warning to me. He didn't say, oh, that's the Presbyterians, or oh, that's those fundamentalists over there. He was like, it's me. And I think that the gospel is most effective when it applies to you first. So yeah, man, All Saints, thank you. Today was a good day. Father David, keep kicking ass. All right, one last thing before y'all go. Unfortunately, Maker's Mark did not sponsor this video. I tried to get them on the phone, they wouldn't answer, blah, blah, blah. However, if you would like to support my mission of being an atheist who gives his hot takes on weird religious movements, consider supporting me on Patreon. I'm just gonna call it now. Hopefully I'm not jinxing myself. 2025 is going to be a big year. I've got probably a dozen denominations and cults and sects and weird fringe movements that I wanna dive really deep into. Some people have adorably thought that this is my full-time gig. It's not. I work a 9-to-5 as a video producer, and I work on an hourly basis. When you support me through Patreon, it allows me to occasionally take an extra day off of work so that I can just focus on editing, and that can often expedite these videos and make them come out a week or two faster. So it makes a big difference. And in addition to that, at the time of filming this video, I write handwritten letters and manuscript fragments to everyone who pledges $10 or more a month. I am actively trying to become a manuscripts nerd. I am fascinated by manuscript transmission. On the drive to church, I was having a riveting conversation with ChatGPT about Codex Bezae. Fun fact, in Codex Bezae, the book of Acts is 10% longer. Fascinating. But yeah, if you like what I do, I really appreciate you, and thank you. My name is Jared. I'm an atheist. Go to church.